every minute of video ends up being 1 to 2 hours of actual total stuff, between the time that you're planning everything, that you're shooting the video, and I'm a one-man operation.
I love having people back multiple times on the podcast, and today's guest is back for a second round. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contra-Bass Conversations. We're talking today with Chris Fitzgerald, and it's always kind of fun to look back and see when I last spoke with somebody. Chris and I talked, I think it was in 2017, but due to the number of podcasts, that was like 300 episodes ago or something like that. So great to have him on again for a round two and talk about what he has been up to and this upcoming BassJitsu project that he's working on. Maybe we'll be presenting it at the International Society of Bassists Convention next summer. Certainly we'll be doing some YouTube videos about it. And oh my goodness, Chris has one of these YouTube channels that just makes you so thankful that the medium, the delivery vehicle of YouTube is there. He's been doing these, deep dive is not even the word for it. These massively comprehensive looks at various aspects of bass technique and musical concepts, jazz bass predominantly, but oh my goodness, it's so great. So that is all linked up to here. And we're also going to feature a little bit from Chris and Gabe Evans. He put this out as an asynchronous recording like you're seeing these days since we're not doing anything live at the present, but very cool. I love Chris's playing. Check out links to definitely his YouTube channel, his website, and everything that's going on, and let's dig in. Is this semester over for you at this point?
The semester ended. So normally here we have to finish before Derby. Of course, Derby was postponed, and it will. Who knows if it'll even be postponed again? But so we were finished by May 1st. So that was good. It was 6 weeks of. We found out that we were going to be going back NTI during spring break. So it was like, okay, your spring break is no longer a spring break. It's learn how to teach online and then teach online for 6 weeks until the end of the semester. So we went through that. I imagine a lot of people did the same.
Exactly. I think most people did some variant of that. Had you now you've done a lot online, obviously, with all and your YouTube videos and that kind of thing. Had you done a lot of video conferencing teaching before, like over Skype or whatever?
I'd done a little bit, only really a couple of times, like if a student over the summer, if a student wanted a lesson and they were back home. Normally I'm so busy with university stuff that by the time, people ask, hey, can I do a Skype lesson or whatever? And I'm sort of at the point where I say, I only teach people through the university. Sorry, because I need a break. As an introvert, after the year, you just want to curl up in a ball with a glass of wine and a cat, and just read a book for 2 weeks or something, So I don't have much experience with it, but I do now. So there's something.
Any, I don't know about you. I'm guessing though, like me, I would rather be there in person with the student. Any positives that you're discovering with online teaching? I mean, I guess the one big positive is you can connect with anybody anywhere in the world. I can think of a whole lot of negatives, but just what's the experience been like?
Well, I mean, I think the only real positive to it is, and there's been a lot of discussion about this, is that everyone knows that schools want us to do more stuff online anyway, looking toward the future. And to develop online classes and to develop non-traditional instruction, just because it seems to be the way things will eventually go in so many spheres. So in a way, we are being forced by circumstances to sort of drag ourselves into the future and explore the positives and negatives of that situation. whether we want to or not, because here it was just, here's what we're going to do, and now we have to do it. And, I think that's probably in the end will be a positive. I mean, we're having to, rather than, oh, it would be nice to explore that at some point and find out what recording and putting video compilations would be like, and recording asynchronously with people, what would that be like? Now we have to do it. And so if there's a positive, is that we're going to end up with a bunch of skill sets that, while we didn't want to actually develop them right now, we're going to anyway, or we're just not going to stay viable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you can call that a positive.
No, that is a well put kind of takeaway that I've been sort of, noticing myself. I was watching through that latest review video that you did of the preamp, which is cool. And
oh my God, you got on that quick. What did I put it up like yesterday or something?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I knew we were chatting, and part of why I like doing the podcast, it's sort of like a good project for me just personally in terms of develop, like it gets me to like do some research on things. Like I don't play amplified a whole lot, but it's interesting. And I really enjoy, the way that the depth of content that you have put out for years. But, I love the way it's organized. I'll link up to that, of course, for folks, but like
right.
You got it all broken down into chapters, just like everything, and A/B examples. And so really, how I would love to know, as I'm starting to do a little bit more on YouTube, like that must be just a Herculean effort putting one of those together. Is that weeks of work?
The way that I heard it described, which is pretty accurate, is that every minute of video ends up being 1 to 2 hours of actual total stuff, between the time that you're planning everything, that you're shooting the video. And I'm a one-man operation. I'm not like, Jeff Chalmers does these amazing, professional quality things. And I've talked to Jeff about it at ISB, and he said, he's got a video guy, and he's, it's a full-time business for him, and he does an absolutely fantastic job. And he's helped school me on how to, improve my lighting and all of this stuff. But for a one-person operation, yeah, I mean, that's true. If it's a 45-minute video, you've got between 45 and 90 hours in it. All told, which is okay. I mean, it's a little sideline. It's my publishing, and it's something like you. I kind of grudgingly start one of these things knowing that at some point it's going to take over my life. But once I get into the flow of the process, it's actually a pretty nice place to be. I've got a wonderful room. I'm actually in the room right now where all those things are recorded, and it's my little home studio. And I love spending time in here doing what it was intended for, rather than sitting at a computer, doing paperwork. So it's kind of good to say, oh yeah, that's what this room was for in the first place. So it's good for that. Yeah. And I imagine you could tell some stories too, because I mean, I'm amazed at, you must be pretty manic with this podcast to make all the connections and reach out to all the people, record this stuff. And I don't know if you have help with the post-production and the editing and all that stuff, or whether it's just you, but I mean, it's pretty Herculean. So I think you probably deal with a lot of the same things.
We could share some fun stories for sure.
Yeah.
It is no longer just me. It was just me for the first, decade or so. But no,
Right.
I've 6 people. I mean, it's incredible what these folks do, from editing to putting it all together to getting it actually published online, to this wonderful woman, Krista Copper, who goes through and records at what point we talk about various topics. So she will at some point listen to this interview, and as soon as we talked about the video or about, you emailed me also about just Aikido and all that, like that will get timestamped into this archive. At some point, I go back and I find related topics and synthesize them into an episode just about, evergreen topics. So yeah, it's evolved over the years, but that 1 minute equals, what was it? 1 minute equals 1 hour of work or something like that.
1 to 2 hours.
1 to 2 hours. I hear that as I've been trying to do these like little 1 octave major scale videos, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, it's been like 45 hours of editing for these 1 minute videos. It's what I love about audio is, and especially a podcast, is this is not too different from you and me just talking, over a coffee or at a convention or whatever. So it's relatively minimal. Any little tech snafu, I got my iPad here and I just write down the time where it happened. So this is kind of a nice, I've sort of got the flow down for this. And really, I'll tell you, I would do this even if I could just lie and say I had a podcast and just never put this out, and I would still get the benefit, because I would like to sit down and hang out with you anyway, but we're so busy just with things in life. Like, when would we ever schedule the time to like talk about this?
I absolutely agree. And I would do the same. I think the process of doing these things brings up all of this stuff that you have to deal with, because you realize you're putting something out. You know, if you're putting something out on YouTube, those people are brutal. I'm sorry, but you know, it has to be together, or you're just going to get trolled out of existence. And, you know, when you go back and review the stuff that you've done, especially, well, not just, but especially when you're playing, you know, if you're playing and you're advocating something and it's not happening on the clip, you're sitting there and you're going, I got to do that again, because that's just not representing what I'm talking about. And it's the same, you know, when you're doing anything online, you are forced you're forced to review what you're actually doing and see if it works or not, and then hone it. And yeah, it's, you know, it's a pain, but it's a really beautiful learning process. So I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, it's something that we educators talk about all the time, which is reflection, right? You are in a very real way reflecting on how things are going. And so I'll tell you, I recommend to anybody that they start doing a podcast, or a video is even more brutal, because you're like, I don't like the way I sound or the way I look, you know.
I've given up on the second half of that one. I'm I'm closer to 60 than 50. I'm like, oh my God, can I get less resolution on this camera, please? But you know, you deal with it. It's like hearing your voice on an answering machine times 1,000, and you hit it like 1,000 times more. But you know, it's not going to get any better as time goes by. So you just learn to accept it.
Yeah, I've become oblivious to the tone of my own voice. That's just me or but I'll tell you, in the early years of my podcast, I could see what my ums and ahs looked like in the waveform, and I got so sick of editing those out that I still say and ah a little bit here and there, but so much less than I did before. So if anybody wants to get better at public speaking, or like delivering something clearly, doing what you're doing, certainly, or what I'm doing, or something like that, I think it's a good, no matter what we do in life, being able to deliver thoughts clearly is a good skill to have, you know? So any sort of development of that
Totally
skill,
agree.
I think that'll help you no matter where you're going.
Totally agree.
So tell me about, okay, so I will link to this review, which I think is very cool. But then now tell me about this other project. So BassJitsu is something that you've been it's been percolating, or have you been like, what is this?
Yeah, I'm working on the video plan for this, because I'm proposing it as an ISB presentation, and they may say, that sounds so stupid, I'm just not going to accept that presentation. Who knows? But it's something that's been very near and dear to me for the last 35 years. And I'll try and give you the Cliff Notes version. It started with my piano teacher back in undergrad, who I have a blog about on my website. She is, speaking of ums and ahs, my throat clears. I'm always editing those out. I met her in 1985, and she was my musical Yoda figure and still is. She lives in my head. She's my musical Yoda. She was about 5 foot nothing, 100 pounds soaking wet, which meant that I'm over a foot taller than her and weighed nearly twice as much as her when we met. And yet her piano sound was easily twice what mine was. And I'm thinking, how is this even physically possible? You know, that this tiny little person with these tiny little hands sounds like a giant compared to me. And that just sort of set one track of my life in motion. So sometime during the time I was studying with her, and the answer she gave me was, I asked her this question, how is this possible? And she grabbed my fingers. I know we're podcasting, but I'm showing you on the on the video. She grabbed my fingers and she said, because you play from here. And then she put her hands around her middle and she said, and I play from here. and my here is way bigger than your here. And so I'm going, oh, okay, I get it. So anyway, at some point during the time I was studying with her, I was with her 6 years. She was amazing, musically one of the most musical people I've ever met, and just loved music. And, you know, one of those, that's what I want to be when I grow up people, you know, when you meet them. And so at some point, just due to a fascination with martial arts in general, I decided we had an Aikido club at the school and it was free. So, you know, we were broke. So I joined that and did that for 5 or 6 years. And one of the first things they do when you get there is they show you some of the principles. So Aikido is a standing art, which is all about staying safe. You're not throwing any punches or attacking anybody. You're just keeping yourself safe. And that has to do with keeping distance from anyone who might want to do you harm. And so one of the examples they give is this thing called unbendable arm. I want you to try this at your desk right now. As you're sitting there, sit with good posture, right? Reach for something on your desk, like a cup of coffee that is like 6 inches away from where your hand can reach, and feel what happens when you reach for that thing that's just out of your reach. Now, don't lean forward, but just reach with your arm. You'll notice that your arm is completely relaxed, right? But the further you reach, you start to feel your chest, back, hips, all your core is engaged. And what they do is they have you put that your hand like that on their shoulder while you're facing them. And then they say, okay, now I can't bend your arm. But now if you make your arm really strong and clench it and try to keep me from bending your arm, they bend your arm instantly, because then you're just using the muscles in your arm. So I'm going, okay, this is just like that Mrs. Kai's thing, right? This is core versus small muscles. The other thing that they did, the sensei was this wonderful guy, and his wife was also a black belt. Excuse me. It's allergy season here in Louisville. So his wife was a black belt. She was about the size of my piano teacher. And he thought that since I was young and full of whatever, it would be a good idea to have me work with her. So I ended up, you know, he would say, okay, punch Angela, you know, and I would be like, really? I mean, she's, you know, he said, no, it's okay. Go ahead. And always what would happen is she would do this move with this extension and she would spin around and I would end up on the floor. And, you know, they were teaching us how to fall safely and everything. I would end up on the floor, and she was very sweet. And she would always come over and say, oh, you know, can I help you up? And I would be like, no, I'm fine, you know. And this went on for a long time. And as I was there for years, I got to see that our sensei did that with every large person who came into the class, because they wouldn't believe that it would work. So we would have them work with his wife. And once someone like half your size repeatedly throws you to the ground effortlessly, you are convinced that there's something going on there that is worth learning. So yeah, that was Aikido. It was just an amazing experience. And I was able to tie it in with Mrs. Kai's, my piano teacher, because I would go back and talk to her about this, and she would say, sure. One of the things she always said was, and she had this funny way of talking that I can't do justice to. She passed about 4 years ago, so she won't ever hear this, but she would always say, right in the first year, she would say, we don't play the piano with our fingers. They're just any more than we digest our food with our teeth. They're just the first things to touch it. And I'm going, we don't play the piano with our fingers. What? So she went on over those years to show me how the fingers should just be relaxed and in this very relaxed position. And we should manipulate our bodies to move the fingers into place to play. And that's how she got that huge sound. And so many years later, when I started, you know, going through all of the trials and tribulations of becoming a bassist, it was natural for those same concepts to be going through my mind. And yeah, so I was all about, it was natural for me to say, okay, how can I do this without clenching my hands, without forcing anything? I mean, it takes a lot more force to play the bass, especially if you're a jazz bassist, because you're constantly womping on the strings with your right hand. But how can you do that in a relaxed way? And it made me think of Aikido. At some point, when my son got old enough, I wanted him to have this experience, and I'd always been fascinated with jujitsu. So we did jujitsu together. I did it for about 5 years until my knees were completely broken and I had to quit in 2014 just because I was tired of knee surgeries. I made it almost to 50. My goal was to make it to 50. I made it to 49, so 49 and a half. So anyway, jujitsu was exactly the same. I mean, the translation of jujitsu is gentle art, but it's anything but gentle because you're grappling on the ground, right? And there it was the opposite. So when you're standing, you're trying to keep distance from your opponent. And that's all about extension and extending your arms and extending your body and engaging your core by extending. In jiu-jitsu, you're on the ground. And so you're trying to close the distance. And it's all about what they call shrimping and closing your body and using your core that way. They're still talking about the hip and the center of the body. But the concept there that came, and of course, as an OCD person, I'm sure you can't relate to that part at all. As an OCD person, I'm doing jujitsu, and of course, you know, both of these arts, I practiced with far more enthusiasm than skill. I mean, I was a musician. It's like I'm an adult bass learner going into a group of bass masters. You know, I was not going to compete with these guys. I mean, it was people who's devoted their entire lives to this. So I was I was an enthusiast, I would say, but I really loved it. And so, but I always saw everything in relation to music. So how does this apply to music, right? How does this concept that we just learned of how to keep this person from choking me out, you know, how do I apply that to the bass? How do I translate that to music? And one of the concepts, which I plan to use in the video very much, is this concept of something called monkey grip. So I'll ask you to do this again and I'll describe it because I know that the podcast will be audio, but we're video, right?
Right.
So, all right, I'm going to stand up for a second. If I just relax my hands, right? And then I pick up my left hand and just hold it in front of me like this, completely relaxed. It's in this shape. The fingers are curved. Thumb is a little off to the side. It's completely relaxed, right? So when you're grappling, every beginner, when they're grappling, does not do this. What they do is you're on top of somebody and you grab the lapels of their tunic to try and control them and keep them from getting you. And after you've sparred only a couple of times, you leave and you can't move your hands at all because your forearms are burned out from grabbing them, right? And then the instructors will say, no, use monkey grip. And monkey grip is this: you just have your fingers in this relaxed shape. You do not grab with your thumb. You just tuck them onto your shirt and don't squeeze. Just don't let your fingers extend, right? And you can do that forever, right? If you grab, your forearms are burned and you end up losing because you can't grab anything or move your hands anymore. This immediately, I thought, this is bass playing right now, because if you grasp the neck, if you grip the neck with your thumb and make a fist kind of shape, or if you're squeezing, your forearm gets so tight. This is the left hand anyway.
Right.
But if you can just hang from the neck, like Rufus Reed told me to do all those years ago, just hang your arm from the neck and don't squeeze. He would have me practice all this stuff without my thumb, right? Like, try practicing. I can't do his baritone, which is beautiful. Right. But he would say, try practicing everything first without your thumb, because then when you add it, it's just going to make things more precise, but you don't need it. He said, it's just there as a fulcrum, right? So I'm going, okay. The other thing is, if you go ahead and try this, Jason, if you put your hand in this position, it led me to study the physiology of the hand, right? So when your hand is relaxed in this position, notice that you can't spread your fingers apart without engaging your extensor tendons, without pulling them back, right? When they're relaxed, you can't spread them apart. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that is weird.
So, yeah. So what it means is the mechanism, the flexor tendons have nothing to do with spreading your fingers apart. It's all in the extensors. So you're extending your fingers, and that's how you can do this Vulcan, live long and prosper, die young and fester, whatever. Vulcan things that they have. Yeah. But when we play the bass, we're taught to spread our fingers, which means, and press down, which means that we're using the extensors and the flexors at the same time, and they're opposed to each other. And I'm going, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
In order to spread the fingers, I have to have this tension on the back of my hand. And then to press them down, I have to negate that with the flexors on the other side while still keeping them spread. And I'm going, that doesn't make any sense. And of course, I burned out my left forearm a million times by playing 4-hour gigs and going, what's going on here? Why is this? So anyway, the jujitsu concept of monkey grip, this relaxed thing, meant for me on the bass that now when I put my left hand on the neck, rather than reaching for a note with the fingers, I'm just moving the arm to put the fingers in place. And instead of pressing with them, I'm just not letting them open, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, again, Rufus's hang on the neck, but without this crazy spread, which causes all this tension in the arm. So that's the basics of the whole concept. Sorry it took so long for me to get through all that.
No, it's very interesting because it's interesting how you have those two opposing forces. I wonder. My mind just goes immediately to how could we start people on the bass better with that in mind? You know, because we learn, we have so much baggage from our early years on the instrument.
Sure.
I've been starting. You're at the collegiate level. Are you working with beginners on a regular basis, or is that something?
Sometimes. So occasionally what we'll get is someone, I wouldn't say any real beginners. Mm-hmm. Sometimes what we'll get is people who have been largely electric bassists who are now transitioning and doubling to the double bass. So their technique is beginner technique, but their musicality is there's always something already there, or they wouldn't have been admitted to the program. And I've really been fascinated to work with these people because, it's like, now's my chance to try to impart some of this stuff in a way that I hope works. And it's also interesting working with secondary students who are primarily classical players who are trained with this hand shape. And we just come up, and I'm really good friends with Sid King, who teaches at my university, and we play together and we're buds. So he's not worried about, what is Fitzgerald teaching these kids when they go do secondary. He's not concerned about that. I just have a term for it. Sid's office is on the 3rd floor and mine's on the 2nd floor. And I call, I'm like, okay, we're going to do 2nd floor technique today. Don't let it interfere with your 3rd floor technique. It's just an alternate, right?
Right.
And they tend to enjoy it. I mean, they like having that option. And so it's been a really interesting thing. As far as beginners, I think it's like what you do in martial arts, honestly. I mean, like when I'm in a martial arts class and I'm working with a higher rank, you're working with a black belt, they're so connected to their core and they're trying to teach you to connect yourself to your core, and you're not going to get it for years and years and years. But I still think it's good to keep that message in mind, not to say, hey, just stop doing what you're doing until you do it perfectly. That would be crazy. Mm-hmm. But to say, no, more from the hip, more from the hip, more from the core. And then they'll demonstrate. And so, you're keeping that as like an aspirational goal that you have to train yourself to do for a long time. But in the meantime, you're still practicing with the tools that you have. And of course, for us, that means doing whatever we have to play in tune. With the classical students, it's that they're coming in with a different technique. And I'm trying to add to that technique because for several reasons. And it's one of those things where it's a little controversial, but my experience has been that when you're playing pizzicato, you have to have a strong stop because the envelope only decays, right? So if your stop is not strong at the beginning, you can't save it with the bow and then dig in deeper. You can't keep the string alive like that note. Once you pluck it, it's only going to get quieter. And if your stop is not deep enough, it's not going to be a good full sound. And a lot of these people, come in and they don't realize it, but they're used to making corrections with the bow of a less than optimal stop. And all of a sudden they're plucking and they're going, wait, why doesn't it sound like when you do it, it doesn't resonate. Mm-hmm. And I've seen Hal Robinson's masterclasses a million times. But Sid has brought Hal to school a number of times. And so I've actually got to see them not only online, but I've got to see them personally. And he does a thing in there where a student will have a less than resonant sound. And he will do this thing where he'll bow the note and he'll ask the student to make the stop. And then he'll replace it with his own hand and bow the same note, and then sometimes have the student bow it. And all of a sudden, just by him playing the note with his left hand, this huge sound comes out of the bass, and the student's still moving the bow. So it's all about the stop. And everyone in the room always goes, oh, wait, what just happened? What? Which happens a lot in Hal's classes, actually, because he's Hal, Right. I mean, I remember the first time I went to one of his master classes and he played one note, and I'm like, holy blank, it's like, I want to cry right now. And he just played one note. It's just like the most beautiful note I ever heard. And that's something that, that I always relate to them is that, that depth of the stop is really important. And that has to do with weight, and that weight has to do with connection to the core. And then that leads us into the topic I wanted to get to in the first place.
Yeah, but I'm going to be practicing. I'm going to be putting my bow down today, and I'm going to be going through it because it's so true. I mean, but I think it's something that's so easy to forget about when you're focused on the bow, because we're taught, oh, it's the bow. The bow is X% of your sound. It's your bank account. The better it is. But yeah, what are you bowing, and what's the quality of that that connection to the bass? I mean, the fingerboard is the intersection of player and instrument. I think Joey Nager, the bass luthier, said to me many years ago, and that's so true. So how that stop is closed, and how we close it without doing the things that we were just talking about, and causing tension and burning ourselves out and potential physical harm. I mean, it's so crucial.
Yeah, and it gets into a deeper subject with, a lot of the jazz setups. I mean, there are people who play with the sort of light setup, the sort of Eddie Gomez kind of setup. When Eddie came to school and asked to borrow a bass, he had me basically set the strings on the floor. Basically, I could blow on them and they would sound. And he sounded amazing like that. Like I couldn't get a sound because my fingers couldn't get under the strings on the right hand to play. But that's his concept, and he's just a genius at that. But a lot of people who play with the more sort of Ray Brown, older school, big sound, they're playing spiracores, or, I mean, I play dominants, they're so stiff that when you take them out of the package, they straighten on their own, And so, if you have those and they're, 6 to 10 millimeters above the board at the end of the board, it takes a lot of force to push those down, and the payoff is that you get this giant sound when you do. Most of the kids in the jazz program play spiracores, but those are still pretty hefty strings, especially the reds, right?
Yeah.
And to push those down consistently and get a good legato sound, and you got to keep the weight on the board, otherwise they'll just buzz out, as we all know, and they'll make that terrible spiracore sound that we all hate so much.
Well, I can't wait to see this take shape. I know what I have enough challenges putting my 90-second videos together that I've been working on recently, let alone these 45-minute videos that you've done, that I've gotten a lot, and even not some of the things that you've done in years past with all the different pizzicato styles that you filmed at the Jamie Aebersold camp, I believe, right? And with, I think John Goldsby was in those, if I remember right, along with
John, Lynn, Rufus were in those, Rich Armandi, Ryan McGillicuddy, and I just basically grabbed everybody who was on faculty there and said, hey, would you film this sequence for me? Because the more perspectives we get, the better, they can see it's done a million different ways.
Well, it's good stuff. I love it. I've said what people have asked me about resources out there to really dig in on jazz and jazz bass. I've sent many a person to your YouTube channel. I'll make sure to link up to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope you do this at ISB next summer, and
Me too. I hope we're through this mess by then. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows anything, but boy, will that be a great bass conference, assuming it all happens. We'll be so thankful that it wasn't scheduled for this June and that it's slotted.
That's a fact.
Yeah. And I'll look for that video after you put in your 90 hours of editing or more, who knows what, but I will be sure to.
I will say quickly, I know we're trying to wrap up, but I will say that it's actually going to be 2 videos. One is going to be about what we talked about today. And then the second one is going to be a series of exercises in 12 keys with patterns, demonstrating how playing different patterns in different keys actually force you to adjust and discover fingerings on the fly, basically different types of fingering paradigms, like the inchworm and the what is it called? What is it called now?
Not the crab.
Not the crab. It's the thing. It's the thing like in the back of a drawer where the pieces of wood fit together like a puzzle piece. I'm losing my words.
I'm blanking too. Okay, someone will let us know.
But yeah, so basically that, and how each key presents its own difficulties, and how each pattern presents its own difficulties, and basically how by practicing those things, a little bit every day and practicing in different keys and applying these concepts, it actually becomes second nature and you don't have to think about it anymore. So it's just like it's like the Marine challenge. You do this for 20 minutes a day over 2 years. I've been doing it 2.5 years now, and it's just really changed my technique for the better. And so, yeah, the second video will be about applying these things. The first one will just be about the things themselves.
Well, I can't wait to check them both out. I hope you get some good time to work on those and spend as little time as possible.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I echo that. So, yeah. Chris, it's good to hang out for a bit. I'll send people to your YouTube and your website, and I'll link up to our last chat. And anywhere else you want me to?
No. Just thank you for reaching out, and thanks for keeping stuff going during this time when we can't actually go to performances and actually get out and play. It's good to see what other people are doing, and I very much appreciate the resource you provide. And I'm sitting here drinking my coffee every morning, and it's like, oh, what's he sending me today? I'll check that out. That's super valuable, and I very much appreciate it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for the kind words, and thanks for what you do. And we'll looking forward to hanging out in person one of these days after this is all in the rearview mirror. Chris, thanks again. Folks, check out more again on YouTube, but also at his website, chrisfitzgerald.com. And yeah, I can't wait to see that BassJitsu session, which I sure hope will be accepted for the ISB convention. Can't imagine why it wouldn't. And it's going to be so cool to see how he frames this on YouTube. I really like how he's approached all sorts of concepts on there. And he's actually given me a lot of inspiration for various projects. I've never attempted to try to do anything as grand on YouTube as he has, but who knows? Maybe I will. But Chris, love what you're doing. Thank you for listening so much. I really enjoy doing these podcasts, and I get so much out of them. And, it's weird to sit here. I'm wearing my headphones. I'm just staring outside of this window. This is my 4th outro in a row that I'm doing, just sort of like improvising off the top of my head. And it's so strange because this feels like such a solitary activity, and frankly, a weird activity, even though I've done it 700 plus times. But it's so cool to know that this goes out into the world and that people are hearing it and are reacting. And it just warms my heart to hear from people, whether that's comments on social media, that's great. Whether it's you sending me an email, which is also great. Feedback at Contra-Bass Conversations if you want to do that. Or whether you share this with someone that you think would benefit from it. Those are the things that just make this medium so cool to me and makes it feel a little less lonely doing this sort of stuff. So thank you for listening. Thank you to the team, Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, Mitch Mooring, and Krista Copper. And Mitch makes beautiful basses, award-winning basses east of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.